In this episode of Investors and Operators, I am speaking with Tony Zaccario, who is the CEO and president of StretchZone. StretchZone now has over 350 units, and they partnered with Princeton Equity, which is one of the a client of 51 Labs. And I thought it'd be interesting just to kind of walk through the StretchZone story, how it grew, and Tony, when you came into the business, and really want to also double click on what it's been like to partner with a private equity firm, what kind of decisions you all were needing to make leading up to that. So uh with that, Tony, thanks for being on here. And I'd love to turn it over to you to kind of get a little bit of background, like what is Stretch Zone, facts and figures, history, and then let's kind of take it from there.
Yeah, well, Jordan, first, thanks for having me and to kind of give the backdrop to the conversation. So, Stretch Zone pretty much pioneered the practitioner assisted stretching movement. It was started by my partner, Jordan Gold, back in 1999. He actually started working on his grandfather as a way to just spend time with him and kind of get him out of this sedentary lifestyle. And he quickly saw the difference that just basic stretching and specifically the Stretch Zone methods that we use today and the impact it made on his life, and really just wanted to transcend that down to the end consumer and realize that kind of everyone needed this form of stretching, right? And everyone could see value, and obviously it could make a significant impact on their lives. And so Jordan kind of started his entrepreneurial journey back in 1999. Was working with one-off clientele, so celebrities, athletes, whoever it might be. Kind of had his burn the boats moment, as he likes to call it, where he said, "Listen, I need to reach the masses," and instead of just going up the pyramid, and decided to go towards the storefront model. And so he didn't open up the first storefront, which is the Stretch Zone model that you know today and what we franchise out. Didn't open up till 2015. Uh, I joined the picture in 2016 when it was still exactly that, just kind of a dysfunctional entrepreneurial story. The running joke is we had like 4 locations when I came on board, and all the stores had hand-me-down furniture and tile floors. There wasn't even a website. Like the hottest thing was Groupon, and that Jordan was raving about. And but regardless of how dysfunctional the business was, all the units were really successful and hyper successful. And I think that was a testament to obviously the product and the service that Jordan had created. And so I partnered up with Jordan back in early 2016 just to kind of create the business around the stretch. And so, in other words, we're trying to figure out the best way to market it, the best way to sell it, just the standard operating procedures at the unit level. And really back then we weren't even really intentional about franchising. And I think that's what's unique about Stretch Zone and kind of its journey is, you see so often, I know you probably talk to so many franchisors out there to where they lean on the business model of franchising and then look for a business that will fit within that vehicle. I think we're a little bit different, right? We were trying to hone in the unit level economics for growth, whether that was corporate or whatever it might be when we first started, grew it up to about 12 locations, and didn't really kind of start the franchising journey until 2017 when we realized that was a viable kind of vehicle to obviously, continue to move that vision to getting the stretch on method to the masses as quick as possible and make a significant difference in people's lives. And so from 2017 up until now, we've really just been mindful of, in the early days especially, just controlled growth, right? Making sure we're finding good franchise partners, super critical. And so where we are today is we're at 355 locations opening about 2 a week currently. So last 2 years, we've opened up pretty much 100 a clip, as far as units open. And to do so all that a single store failure, I think is a large testament to not just the unit level economics of the business, but also the franchise base that we have currently.
That's awesome. So basically from 2017, it went from around 12 units when you made the decision to franchise, or
Yeah.
2016 or so, to now in 2024, it's at over 350
Yeah.
units. And
Correct.
when did you move into the CEO and president role?
Well, I mean, when you're starting a true entrepreneur startup, I think titles don't really mean much, right?
Chief coffee maker, chief
Yeah,
cleaner of these of the tables.
it's so funny because Jordan and I joke about it now in the sense of like, you have certain budget numbers, right? We're shooting for well over 100 units open this year, and like even last year at 90 units, it was slightly under right what we anticipated and what we were hoping for. And I remember,
Yeah.
you quickly forget those early startup days. And I remember the startup days, we would look at other brands growing and be like, wow, can you imagine the fact of opening like 2 a week or like 1 a week? And then like to
Yeah.
be upset about missing it by like 1 unit. out of like 90 open stores, you're just like, come on. But no, so
Yeah.
early on, it was kind of everyone wears all a bunch of different hats. Effectively took over 2019 as CEO. And back then we had 70 locations.
Okay.
And it was a great time to get started as CEO. My young career. COVID really was a fun part of that. About 5 months later. So yeah,
For a brick and mortar
yeah, or
business.
for a hands-on service. Yeah, I mean
Right.
it was fantastic.
Just be across the room, be like, all right, I need you to stretch your legs like this. No,
Yeah,
turn it
yeah,
that way. Thank you
yeah.
for your membership fee.
No, that was an interesting time.
So, okay, well, I would love to come back to that part on how you manage that, especially so early in the career and not having, 10, 20, 30 years of operational experience. But let's keep on going throughout the story. Then let's
Yeah,
come back to some of
of
the
course.
operational aspects. So in I think it was March of 23, you
Yep.
partnered with Princeton. I read on the press releases. I think Boxwood advised
Mhm.
the stretch zone on the sale. Can you kind of walk us through the overall process and just like what was important to you and the team on who to partner with at this next chapter in the journey? What were kind of the big questions and decisions?
Yeah, so for us, listen, when you have a hyper successful franchise concept, I see it all the time. Is we were getting approached constantly. I mean, so like just throughout the journey of Stretch Zone, and the fact that we made it to 250 locations, which is where we were in March of 23, uh, without any kind of outside investment, just completely organically was pretty. I guess I didn't realize how rare it was. Right, new to franchising, but I recognized it was fairly rare. And Jordan and I finally got to the point where we recognized, hey, we got from point A to point B, which is 250 units. We are still growing at a very rapid rate. We understood the value of maybe entertaining some of the people that are knocking on the door and bringing on a strategic partner that would understand, hey, these are some of the potholes. These are what you want to look out for. If we were intentional about getting to 1,000 units, right, 1,500 units domestically, start broaching international, having that guidance was going to be super super helpful. We were very fortunate to be in a position like liquidity was never a problem, right, from a cash perspective on the business. So it's not like we needed a capital investment to maybe get any initiatives started or complete any initiatives. That was never our business. It's a very simple business. For us, it was about the people and who's going to provide that. So we engaged Boxwood in late of 22, right? So towards the fall of 22, and really went through a thorough process, very competitive, like hyper competitive, which was great and a great experience. And the reason why we picked Princeton and what kind of stood out to us about Princeton is really the people behind the business, Jim, Jack. They're very aggressive in nature, which Jordan and I always like, right? They understood franchising, and so like franchising wasn't just part of what the firm did; it is what the firm does,
Yeah.
which is very really valuable to us. And so it's kind of like a founder CEO. It was, and Jordan and I always put it this way, right? I mean, the money's there, and we had a competitive nature, and quite frankly, like Princeton wasn't even necessarily the top offer that we had out there, but they were up there. But what for us in evaluating people was it was more so, hey, every partner and PE partner is good when it's rainbow sunshine, everything is up and to the right. We know that when we are evaluating partners is, hey, God forbid something, there is a little bit of downward trend, right? Or there is some challenges that you're facing as an organization. Who, as a partner, right, in a firm, are willing to get in the trenches with you, are going to understand kind of the nuances of franchising. And we really felt comfortable with Princeton. They have a clear track record of success in the franchise industry. And they're just good people that would contribute to the culture that we worked really, really hard to create. And so everything since then has been phenomenal. They've been absolutely true to their word, and they've been incredibly additive just to the value of the organization and everything that they've brought.
What does that mean, additive? Like, what are the different functions of the business that they helped
Right.
out with that you didn't have before when you might have been, what, 250 units at the time of sale or something like that? Like,
It's
think through like whether it's the FDD or, the other stuff, like what did they do and what do other franchisors need to think
right.
about when they're considering who to partner
Yeah,
with?
I think it's, listen, we don't get to 250 units without a single store failure organically if things weren't buttoned up, and I say that humbly, right? And so even with that being said, there's a level of professionalization that comes when partnering with private equity, right? And professionalization within the business. And so, I mean, I thought that I was really in tune, and probably relatively I was in tune with the business operations, what's going on. But just having their eyes on it, right, and helping crunch the data, right, and getting the data packs and getting a different perspective on how to interpret the data, right, and the KPIs, leading indicators, lagging indicators, so on and so forth, that information is super critical that they're willing to run, right? They have no issue. They're willing to kind of help with the bandwidth instead of tasking that or forcing that upon our team. They really are partners of saying, "Hey, listen, what are some of the tools? What are different ways we can look at the business that will give us proper insight to provide more value to the franchisees, which ultimately increases unit level economics, right? Which keeps AUVs, which is a win-win for everyone around." So I think from a healthy perspective on the business, as someone that can they have the anecdotal experience of across multiple franchise brands and franchise concepts. They can provide some quick insights and quick toolkits that would even help us at Stretchstone. But I think just giving a fresh professional look on the business is super valuable. And it's funny because I think when talking to franchisors, a lot of like founder CEOs and maybe your experience, that part almost scares them a little bit, right? Because it's almost like they don't want someone taking a deep look under the hood. Whereas, like, where I would challenge people, whoever's considering going through this process, is I would challenge you to kind of reframe how you're looking at it and welcome it. Because at the end of the day, right, it's just going to better your business, going to better the franchisees, it's going to better everything.
So the things that you mentioned in terms of professionalized business, bringing data analytics, like other private equity firms do that.
Mm-hmm.
So what is it that really moved the needle for you guys on
Yep.
why to go with them at, one or two times less, one or two turns less of EBITDA than maybe other bids were at? But like, what were some of the key decisions? Like, all right, this is the partner for us. This is who we're selling the business to. This is who we're going to, this next chapter with. Because other firms have their playbooks for franchises who have tons of, 25 plus brands that they backed.
For sure. But what Princeton was adamant about is they're not trying to reinvent the wheel. That is not what Princeton does. And like meaning like they are there not as a form of governance, they're there as a form of support. And so, like when talking to other CEOs that Princeton has worked with, is that everything they say? Because listen, at the end of the day, and by the way, it wasn't a turn or two of you. Like it was, I mean, when I say like they're pretty much up there. But when talking to every PE group when you're sitting across management meetings, is listen, if it's a competitive process, they're going to tell you. I don't want to say they're going to tell you what you want to hear, right? But they're going to tell you about all the franchise success. To your point, right? They're going to say, "Hey, we have a playbook for franchising, and it's been proven to be successful." Um, but then when talking to references and talking to people in the industry and talking to other CEOs, there are definitely other PE groups that are a little more heavy-handed that definitely have their way and their way about going about running the business. We wanted someone that understood that we were in a position as an organization to where we wanted the help, we wanted the support of people that knew franchising at all different levels. And also, and Princeton had a track record of being a membership based model, right, in the health and wellness world, right? They were massage envy. They understood our model very, very well. They understood the end consumer from a retail perspective. They also understood the end consumer for franchisee. And so that was a big help. But Princeton is not, they're not set up to come in and upset the apple cart. They want to support the human capital that's here. They want to support the ride, right? They're not here to reinvent, nor do they intend, nor do they have any desire to. So hearing that from their CEOs and from their portcos, while also hearing it from them, was super impactful to us. And yeah, I mean that's what really just stood out. Kind of was a good feel from
Yeah.
Jordan and myself.
On the process on the sale process,
Mhm.
what advice do you have for others who might be considering to sell on, things that you felt went really right during the sale process and maybe some missteps that like, okay, if I had to do it again, I would have done this.
Listen, we were really fortunate to have such a competitive process. I will say, like using an investment banker, right? Boxwood was really helpful. Um,
Yeah.
I think you can't. And I remember this isn't not like Boxwood deserves every single like penny, right, for representing us and all that. And I love Brian and Pat and all them. Um, but I remember when we were first getting the engagement for investment banker, right? This is Jordan and I's first go around going into this whole process, and for many founder CEOs that might be listening, this is their first time.
Yeah.
I remember looking at the deal fees. I was like, holy crap! Like, I mean, they're getting paid a decent amount of money. It's like, do you really need them? And luckily, we had sound advisors around us that have been through this process. And like, you absolutely do. And I think you, as a CEO, I can't overstate the importance of having someone to manage that process so you can retain focus on the business. Um, because if you're trying to
Well,
do both, there's no way.
it's just like it's the same mentality for hiring people on your team.
Bingo.
All
Yep.
A lot of times you're going to get what you pay for.
Yep.
And it might, and we experienced that with our business where we just went from, in the past 60 days, went from 8 people to 11 people full time.
Yeah.
And that's a pinch, when
Yeah.
you're a smaller business. But you also have to, we hired a senior video editor versus hiring a junior, and you promote them
Yeah.
and you train them and mentor them. We also ended up hiring a junior, but that senior, like a month into it, we're like, oh, that's why we
Yeah.
made this investment. It makes everything else better. It was the same thing when my co-CEO and wife Jing joined the business as a former lawyer. When she joined the business, everything else went better. And we're like, why didn't we
Elevated.
do this 1 or 2 years
Yeah.
earlier? So that pinch that you feel, whether it's investing in the team or hiring an advisor, like at the end of the day, you're going to get what you pay for.
Yeah, it's worth your weight, and I think that's where it's when we go through the process, the most critical thing as an operator, right? The process is not short, right? I mean, if you're doing it the right way, I mean, it's long. I mean, we started in signed engagement in August, right, or end of July, August,
Yeah.
and we didn't close till the end of March, which from everyone I've heard is right. It's pretty much in line, maybe on the quicker side. So you're looking at a 6 month or way longer than 6 months. But my whole point is you during that time frame as an operator, like there's a microscope on the business from
Yeah.
anyone, any prospective buyer, right? They're evaluating the business over a subset of time, and it's the most critical time as an operator where you can't falter, right? You want to meet all the projections that you gave. You want to make sure that you're showing that your projections are valid, um, and so that's the one piece of advice where I'd give is like do not understate right the importance of a investment banker, and also at the same time is you can't overstate the importance of running the business and making sure that you retain focus on the business.
How did you manage selling the business as
Mhm.
well as running the business?
Uh, you gotta lean on the team, right? So, I mean, if good people around you, I think it's, we had a pretty sound operation to where, like, in my mind, like the business should be agnostic to any individual, right? The stretch on business is not Tony Zaccario, it's not Jordan Gold, it's not Drew Brees, it's no, right? And so those systems and operating procedures are already embedded in there. Um, I think listen, I think it's doing double time. It's just at the end of the day, it's you got to make time for management meetings. You got to make time to obviously court potential investors and talk with them and interview them. Um, and I think, but that's where again, I think Box was really helpful to where they're pretty adamant, like, hey, listen, we'll handle a lot of the legwork. We're not going to try to take too much of your time. And also the PE groups that were coming in were very respectful of the time too, to where it's, hey, you need to focus on running the business. We'll pull you in when it's critical. So I
Yeah.
think having a good team around you is just helpful.
Let's go back to 2019, 2020.
Hmm.
So, you know, how in the heck did you manage this? You and the team manage this business through COVID when your business is touching people with stretching and you cannot touch people during COVID? How many units did you have and how in the heck did you get through that?
We had 70. Well, by the time 2020 came around, we had probably about 80 locations, something of that nature, in March. And I mean, at the time, I was brand new CEO. I was, I'm going back, I was, I'm only 30 now, right? I was 26 at the time, right? So not really a weathered CEO. And I remember, and where it came down is I remember I was sitting at a lunch with one of our attorneys, like franchise attorney, and it was a franchisee in New Jersey who called me, and he always kind of freaks out, right? He's just one of those, just like always cries wolf, and it's just dramatic in nature. He's like, "Hey, this COVID thing," because I mean, everyone heard about it. Started the rumblings early March, and it was like kind of this cold and sickness, and he's like, "Hey, the city says we need to shut down." I remember like Jeff, like, what are you talking about? Like this city's not going to mandate you to shut down. What do you mean shut down non-essential businesses? Um, lo and behold, right? And then so then after that, it was like just it was like a domino effect, right? And it just spread like wildfire. And for us, the way we navigated it is the nice thing about our business is the unit level economics are pretty sound to where like most of your costs are a function of revenue, meaning that when you have higher sales, right, your liabilities go up from a payroll side, but your fixed costs are relatively low. So it's very easy. And we actually, and the reason why we knew this is because we started in South Florida and we had these lovely things called hurricanes. And I remember when hurricanes would come by, and I don't know if you've ever been to South Florida, spend time. I mean,
Yeah.
they'll talk about hurricanes a week out before it's actually even potentially going to hit, and it would cause all these disruptions in our business for our South Florida stores when we were growing this business. And every time there was a hurricane month, we'd always expect to be in the red. And if anything, we wouldn't be because our liabilities actually went down because we weren't stretching as much, or our payroll was down. And so we understood that it was actually fairly easy to kind of shutter up the business without incurring significant loss from as a franchisee, right, or the unit or from a unit level perspective. And so when COVID hit, it was understanding that towards like, hey, listen, we can probably weather the storm, even the franchisees from a capital perspective for a good while. It was more educating the franchisees, right? It was it was a lot of fear, right? I mean, the media was very much so from a fear mongering perspective. Nobody knew what the hell was going on. And so it was kind of educating. So we literally would have calls twice a week throughout the entire time of COVID. So system wide calls for all the franchisees to keep the community together. And I think more importantly, for a lot of first time business owners, I mean, this is daunting, right? This is scary stuff. And so, it was first of how to appropriately and properly shut down, right? Get the messaging out to the client base. And then we had the first stores open within probably 7 weeks, depending on where the state was. And then it was how to properly reopen. And so it was a big campaign, a big push. Like we did a big promotion around reopening. And so the whole concept was like, hey, we need to first attract those individuals that are already familiar with the service because we understood that a new consumer who might be fearful of COVID coming back in, they don't really want to take part in a hands-on service, let alone they don't even know what stretching is, which is always our battle, right? It's to educate the consumer on the importance of value stretching. So it's, hey, let's target our existing customer base. Let's offer them a promo they can't resist. It was like 1 month free and really try to capture them immediately to drive some cash flow right away. And it worked out tremendously.
Well,
So we
the
got
other
this.
interesting thing is like number one, there is the safety concern of being there is the safety concern of the hands-on business.
Yeah.
And number two, it's discretionary in terms of like I just lost my job or something's happened because of COVID. Why do I need to go get stretching? So you guys managed through that. And what
Yeah.
are some what do you think are some of the key takeaways? One of the things I'm hearing is that you over communicated to the franchisees and brought the community together and built a community. So it sounds like it
Yeah,
was
it's a
you're going
culture.
through
I
it
mean,
together.
you hyper communicate, and I think like the one takeaway is like you can't shy away from the tough conversations. You also can't shy away from it as a franchisor of especially like when PPP was rolling out. When it first rolled out, a lot of people forget this. When it first rolled out, it was only applicable to restaurants. Like when they
Yeah.
first announced it, and so there's nothing wrong with saying like, hey, we don't know either, but we're kind of keeping our finger on the pulse. And I think for franchisees, and this goes for any kind of franchisor going through a difficult time, is you can't shy away from like the ugly reality of like, hey, there is a lot of confusion out there. Hey, there is a lot of fear, but we're on top of it, and together we'll navigate these waters collectively. And if you do need help or specific help, feel free to give us a call. Um, and so I think that's super critical, and not shying away from the hard conversations, and also not shying away from making the tough decisions. Furloughing staff is never fun, but we made that decision very early on in COVID, recognizing that most of our team could get reimbursed to obviously the state, right, or the federal government, pretty much exactly that of their salary, and so there's no reason to obviously hinder the business to potentially a catastrophic point, just as a nicety. And all of our staff came back, right, and everyone understood that. But I think it's communicating that. But even that in and of itself, right, is having the tough conversation with the team members about saying, hey, listen, we have to do this for the health of the business. Um, this is why we're doing it. You're still going to be made whole. And they appreciated that. And so I think at the end of the day, franchisees and franchise concepts and organizations, they just appreciate the candor and they appreciate a no BS kind of delivery and just be
Yeah.
real and be upfront about what's going on.
What does the next chapter look like? And what do you think are some of these key levers
Right.
that you're really focusing on for this next chapter when you do have the capital to rapidly expand? But there's also the potential that when you grow so fast, how do you make sure that franchisees are still getting the TLC that they want, that they need?
I think it's a robust, regional support network that overlays with the centralized support system. I think where you say like where we look ahead. I mean, listen, we're relatively young in the business cycle. We have 350 units. We have a TAM of 1,500 plus, right? As far as
Yeah.
domestic U.S. The nice thing about our model is 1,000 square feet. We're able to penetrate kind of these secondary, tertiary markets really well because we don't need an active client list of 1,000 plus members, right? We need a few hundred active clientele to have a hyper successful unit. The way our pricing works. One thing that we just launched was like our Flex membership, which Princeton was really helpful with. So Flex membership is kind of a low cost, high value opportunity, right? So it's $99 a month, a traditional kind of health and wellness play on a membership based model that allows us to tap into a completely different consumer. I mean, we launched that in February of like February 12th of this year.
Yeah.
And so in the 2 months time, we've already increased our active customer base by 50%. Just being able to tap into a large consumer base. So it's little nuanced stuff like that to where, hey, how do we make sure we're not going to saturate a market, right? While opening and continue to increase TAM, right? And so yeah, I mean, there's a lot of green pasture ahead. I think as a franchisor, to your point, in the support aspect, it's about doing what we're currently doing just better, right? More effectively, more efficiently, and making sure you always have that finger on the pulse of the franchisees and are ready and equipped to be able to support them adequately.
Shifting gears a little bit, so I do a lot of work with
Mhm.
transitioning veterans, and we have primarily pointed them in the direction of investment banking, private equity, consulting, and um, a lot of them are interested in having their own business. So
Mhm.
just kind of ballpark, like what if they wanted to do it? Uh, what are the resources available to veterans who want to start a franchise? Like, I
Yeah.
don't know if they get, preferential loans on the franchise fee, and then also like ballpark, what are the different things that like the upfront costs of actually doing the stretch
Yeah,
zone
the
business?
upfront cost, like, it's 10% off our franchise fee, so it's a partnership that we have with the IFA. I think for, like, veterans are I'm personally just incredibly grateful for, obviously, the service everything they do for the country. I think there is no such thing as enough programs to help them, right, and kind of navigate that transition out into the workforce. And you know, for us, we love it when a veteran comes across, right, as a prospective franchisee, because normally they're hyper ambitious, they're hardworking, they understand the importance of following systems, processes, operating procedures that already exist as long as they work, which is, I mean, as a franchisor, is exactly what you want from any franchisee. And there's passionate individuals about what they do, and should they choose to do it. So, I think there's plenty of resources out in the franchising industry. I think for us and what Stretch Zone offers, not just to veterans, but I think for any new business owner, is oftentimes we hear that, wow, your business can't be that simple. And it is, and we understand that and we leverage that, right? I mean, we have 5 tables, we have labor, we have no moving inventory, we have no waste, we have no spoilage, we have none of the other complexities. It's a lower barrier of entry from a capital perspective from a new franchisee. And so all that kind of alludes and helps support a brand new business owner to allow them to get on their feet, right? Have the autonomy of small business ownership while also having the guardrails to ideally a successful uh, business endeavor.
So what is it? 5 tables, 1,000 square feet,
1,000 square feet, 5 tables.
and when
um,
it's fully, you know, how many employees do they will they might have?
eight to 10.
Okay,
Yeah, I mean,
and
so
then
super basic, right? So scheduling, yeah, I mean, there's tech platforms that will literally assist with any aspect of the business or create some kind of efficiency or synergy within the business. So,
yeah.
um, if anything, we always try to leverage tech to simplify the business even more so. And so finding franchisees again that are just, and it really this boils down to the challenge of any good franchisor, right? It's not about creating good business. You should have, in my opinion, you should have a good business model before you begin franchising, which we did. Uh, our biggest challenge is finding people that are just simply willing to execute the script, right? Execute the playbook, run with the playbook, and be involved in their community and be involved in business.
Yeah. And where do they find out like what the financial opportunity is? Like I think I talked about with Scott Abbott, and he was mentioning there's some sensitivities, but I don't know what those are. This is my third interview in franchising,
Oh,
so
it is.
Yeah. Because I focus more on like private equity firms, investment banks, their portfolio companies. It could be a gene editing business or a stretch zone
Yeah,
business.
we so there are some sensitivities. So it's FPR, so any kind of financial representation like we can't give as a franchise. Or for us, we have like our stretchzone.com. We have a franchise development page. We have
Okay.
testimonials from our franchisees down there. Um, it's pretty regulated on what you can say as a franchisor. But like to my piece of advice, like when people typically find out is like we disclose all of our franchisees' contact information. And I'm adamant about, hey, call franchisees and call them and see and ask them directly about what their experience is. And at the end of the day, we don't get to 350 units. Obviously, it's obviously financially viable or successful, you don't get to that spot. All your units aren't multi-unit owners if it's not financially feasible or successful. So calling the franchisees is a procedural and it's a good kind of diligent step. But more importantly, talk to the franchisees if you're vetting a franchisor about their experience with the brand. Right? There's plenty
Yeah.
of ways to make money out there in the world. I think what's special is to find a business that you're passionate about, that you know that you're making a positive impact in your community on, while also potentially making some money. I think that's
Yeah.
what's most important.
What where are the opportunities, and this is also speaking from ignorance, in terms of like if you look at the map of the US, like, hey, we need
Right.
franchisees, a new market in Oregon. But you know what? There is a mature market in Georgia and they could buy an existing market. Like, how should they think about that?
Buying existing, you're saying like buying an existing business versus buying a new
Yeah, like for
franchise?
I live in Atlanta, Georgia. Here in Alpharetta, I went by and I saw a stretch zone. Like,
Yeah.
something like that. Like, is it better to buy out an existing franchisee or do market
I
new
think it's
market?
I think it's really all depending on the individual. I mean, it depends on what they want to do. Like buying existing businesses in general for franchising, there's two different takes on it, right? There on one side of the coin, there's a value add, there's existing customer base, there's existing clientele,
Yeah,
and it can be very fruitful, right? Then there's debate on how much you're going to pay for it, right, with that franchisee because you're buying it from them. Um, the downside of buying existing business is that it's not necessarily your culture that's embedded in the organization, right? So there might be some challenges overcoming that, especially if you're trying to get necessarily a deal on existing franchise, which might necessarily be right. If you're buying a high performer and you can afford a high performer, right, and you want to pay 3 turns on it, great, go for it.
yeah,
If you're buying an underperformer and trying to get in at a low capital, which is be equitable to like starting a new franchise,
yeah. You got to
there
deal with legacy team
legacy
dynamics,
legacy
etc.
problems. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean legacy problems, legacy challenges,
Yep.
and not necessarily saying you can't, but it's definitely a particular type of profile that can overcome that, create their own culture, embed that, get the right team in place, and it can be very fruitful. And there's plenty of franchisees out there in the world that is their bread and butter business, is that they look for kind of underperformers, they gobble them up, they turn them around really
And they
quickly.
know how to turn it around and they can buy it. Yeah.
Versus when you start new, you get the entire support. You're starting fresh, clean from a complete clean slate, and it's your culture. So I'd say if you're a first time business owner, like if a prospective franchisee comes and approaches us, unless you have an experience or track record of running businesses and small businesses or turning around businesses, like I would never advise one to
Mm.
go ahead and buy an existing unit. I would say, hey, start with one, get your feet underneath you, learn it really well, then maybe broach that idea down
Then
the
think
line.
about it. Yeah. That's really interesting. Um, this has been an awesome journey. And I think we've only scratched the surface. We could probably do a whole nother episode
Your chapter two,
on managing through COVID.
man. There's so many stories. I mean, then there's a teaser for chat. I mean, we could spend a whole time on that. I mean, because then we had the issue like when you're opening up. And I know we're going to hop off, but like when we were opening up, like social media is the best thing in the world and the worst thing in the world. I used to tell franchisees like the best thing about social media is that you can reach anyone in the world with a click of a button, and the worst thing about social media is that you can reach anyone in the world with a click of a
More than a
button.
quick button.
Because like the problem is like we'd have Georgia opening up, right? Politics aside, just states, cities, municipalities viewed it completely different on how to handle it. So we'd have Georgia opening up, but then like an ad would pop up to a consumer in like California, and like California, or like however they might find it, would be like, how dare you open up in this time of like COVID? Like what? It's like, so we had to be very careful about that. And then like the only thing that we needed is like when we first opened up, we needed like the N95 mask,
Yeah.
and it was like the wild west of like trying to source out these masks, find out where they were. it was crazy. I mean, there's plenty of war stories on
I,
that one.
I think that might be a trailer to episode 2.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many nuanced stories that are really good on it, but
This is good. No,
yeah,
I really appreciate you taking us through this journey. And then also just kind of the process, working with an investment bank, your considerations through that process, but also what it's been like now a year working with a private
yeah.
equity firm, and talking about the next chapter of this business. It's awesome. And I do think this would be fun to do as a chapter 2. And we could
Let's do it.
dive a whole lot deeper on just COVID and how you manage through that.
Let me know
Awesome.
when. Appreciate you having
Thanks
me.
so much for the time with this. I appreciate it.